Hello, and welcome to the Macroeconomics Podcast by Coach Williams. In this podcast, we're going to discuss some major numbers that affect the health of the overall economy. In this podcast, we're going to cover the first macroeconomic standard. The things in bold will be the things that we will cover in this podcast, so pay special attention. Now, when we talk about macroeconomics, we see a lot of numbers, and our essential question for today is what are all these numbers and why are they important? Why do I need to know what all these numbers I see on the news stand for? Why are they important and what are they? Here are some numbers that you might have heard or seen on the news. 14.591 trillion, 9%, and 1.20%. What are these numbers? These numbers are the GDP, the unemployment rate, and the inflation rate. And in this podcast, I want to discuss why these numbers are important and why you need to know about them. Now let's look at each number individually. First of all, GDP. This is the basic measure of a country's output. It measures the final value of all the country's goods and services produced. Despite its limitations, however, it is the best tool to use to monitor how healthy an economy is. Here's a recent map comparing different countries' GDP. As you can tell, the darker the blue, the higher the GDP, meaning the healthier the economy. GDP is represented by the formula C plus I plus G plus X minus M. C stands for consumption. That is the spending by people on a daily basis at stores like Walmart. I stands for investment. Companies invest in their business in order to make things more efficiently so they can offer goods and services at a lower price. G is for government spending. That is spending at all levels of government. Recently, we have seen an increase in government spending through recent government legislation. And X is for exports and I is for imports. One important thing to note is that the one number that will always be negative in this equation is the net exports component, which is the X minus M. Because in America, we always tend to import more than we export. It's very important to know this equation because it's very important to know where things are counted. GDP helps us measure economic growth. Economic growth is defined as a 3% increase in GDP. Recently, we have seen a 3% increase due to government spending and stimulus package passed by the government. Another important number to know is the inflation rate. Inflation rate measures inflation, which is a general rise in the price level. The inflation rate can go up or down. As you can see here, recently, the inflation rate has leveled off and there has been a slight steady increase in inflation over the past few years. Here is a view of inflation rates around the world. As you can see, the redder the color, the higher the inflation rate. One country I want to focus on specifically is Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe experienced what we call hyperinflation. Zimbabwe's government printed money at a very quick pace, driving the value of their dollar way down and pushing the inflation rate to very extreme levels. Zimbabwe's money became worthless, therefore prompting people to use it as wallpaper. It's very important to understand what happened in Zimbabwe because their government's actions are very analogous to our government's actions here recently in America. If we understand what happened in Zimbabwe, it can help us prevent a devaluation of our dollar here in America. Another economic condition we have to be aware of is stagflation. Stagflation is where the economy does not grow, but however prices continue to increase. The tool we use to measure inflation is the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index measures a market of baskets of goods and their prices from year to year. Now, the market basket consists of goods that people use on a daily basis. The market basket contains anything from food to TVs to cars to gasoline to even a personal computer. The formula used to construct the Consumer Price Index is the current year divided by the base year times 100. The multiplication of 100 gives us a number in percentage that we can use to measure the difference in the cost of the baskets from year to year. One important thing to remember is that the index number in the base year is always equal to 100. This gives us a nice round number that we can always compare back to. The last important number to know is the unemployment rate. Unemployment rate is the number of people who are currently out of work but are willing to work. Also, to be considered unemployed, you have to be currently looking for work. As you can see, due to the current economic conditions, unemployment is on the rise. Unemployment is calculated as the number of unemployed people divided by the labor force times 100. It is very important to know the different types of unemployment. Frictional unemployment is when workers are between jobs on a voluntary basis. For example, if I were to leave my job in Cartersville and find another job in New York City, I would be considered frictionally unemployed during my time while I'm looking for a job. Structural unemployment is when your job becomes obsolete. Cyclical unemployment is probably the worst type of unemployment because that deals with the business cycle. If the business cycle is in a recession, unemployment goes up, and that is considered cyclical unemployment. Seasonal unemployment is simply jobs that depend on the season. For example, you don't need a lifeguard in the winter in Wisconsin. And the last type of unemployment is technological unemployment. That is when a new robot or some type of technological innovation comes in and takes the jobs of many people in the workplace. This has been Coach Williams' Economics Podcast. I hope that you have learned quite a lot about macroeconomics. Stay tuned because the next series of podcasts will be about aggregate supply and aggregate demand. We'll also discuss the business supply and how the business supply increases and decreases, or expands and contracts. Then the last part of the macro unit will be about monetary policy and fiscal policy. What are the steps that the Fed takes and that the federal government takes in order to keep that economy growing and to stop the economy from contracting? So if you have any questions, please email me at my school email address, or feel free to ask questions tomorrow in class.